She is a global talent acquisition partner over at Norwegian Bank Investment Management. She has tons of experience, 20 plus years of experience in recruitment from companies such as Microsoft, such as DNB and Telenor. And today she will be sharing her insights and experience on how to run complex and big recruitment teams. Super excited to have you here with us today, Kristin.
I sound so old when you say it like that. But yes, it is actually 20 years plus. I try to forget that. But yes, so today I work in NBIM, Oil Fund. I am responsible for all the recruitment we do in Oslo, London, New York, Singapore, and Tokyo. With regards to all the investment support roles. And I have a co-worker who sits in London, and she does all the investment roles. So between us, we share the fun with regards to recruitment, not the money.
That would be nice. For people that don't know NBIM that well, could you elaborate a bit more about the fund and the organization, maybe the size of the fund, some key facts?
Yeah, so we were established 25 years ago. It was a good idea that some politicians thought to have this fund with the surplus from the oil we have. And obviously, as most people know, it has increased in value exponentially over the 25 years. We are we're governmental. We're part of the central bank. We are 600 people plus, where half of us sits in Oslo and half of us sits, across all these other offices. I would say we're quite a small organization of 600 plus with regards to how much wealth we're actually, investing. It's an international organization, definitely. And I would say it's a very nimble organization. And we have, of course, as most people know, a very, interesting CEO for the time being, which me on the recruitment side really benefit from. So yeah, that's where we are.
Very cool. That is good. Could you tell us a bit more about your role as a global talent acquisition partner? What does your day-to-day look like, and what's your responsibility?
So I would say my role is pretty much split in pure admin, like all recruiters does, but also a lot on the advice side. I sense that the organization is extremely open for dialogue, advice, sparrings. We are involved with, in every step of the recruitment, and I feel that the hiring managers in NBIM are extremely open for any advice. It's not like you just execute whatever. You actually on board with every decision we make. I work with hiring managers of the entire stack, right, from head roles to global heads to chiefs. Sometimes we involve Nikolai Tangen too, if that's wanted. And I work with all the locations we have, which requires, working with the UK people, London people, Singapore people. They're fairly different in culture, I would say. But what is the same for all of them is that they're extremely friendly, super nice people, and smart people. So, and my role in all of this is purely to support them. That's my priority. Number one is to support them, drive the process, make sure that they feel taken care of, and push when I need to and hold back when that's needed.
In terms of the different geographies, size-wise, do you have most presence in Oslo, or is it New York? What does that look like?
So Oslo being 300 people, we are, I would say, 120 something in the UK, London being the second largest. Then you have New York with about 80, I think. And then we have Singapore with 50. And there are, thinking loud now, 6 or 7 in Tokyo. And we also have a small office in Paris of 10 people. So the Paris and the Tokyo office is a bit outside the oil fund, but they are only focusing on investment in assets, in building, infrastructure, windmills, that kind of, yeah.
Obviously, the fund is insanely big, right?
Yeah.
So I assume with the values that you're investing and the responsibility you have on behalf of the Norwegian population, no pressure there. How does that play into your recruitment strategy, right? You can, of course, to some extent, afford hiring top people because the effects of every individual's contribution has, like, from financial point of view, massive effect.
Yeah, well, how it affects. First and foremost, I think integrity is, is in the backbone of all of us. So we definitely look for people in any stage. We check off integrity. But with regards to the size of the fund and what we do, in Norway we get applicants quite easily. Most Norwegian Scandinavians know of the Norwegian fund. It's more difficult in London, New York, Singapore, Tokyo. So the strategy-wise, we have to put more effort into call it branding, visibility, using agencies. The sort of the spiel, the story we tell people needs to be more present. In Oslo, we don't have to explain what the Norwegian Oil Fund is or who we are. So in that sense, it's a different kind of dialogue. And of course, we sometimes get questions like, why should we work for making the Norwegian people even richer? You are the money that comes in comes from the oil, right? Is that okay? How do we use our grandiose size in a responsible way? So we talk about responsible investment, how we have quite thorough processes in what companies do we invest in, where do we divest and why, and should we always pull out or should we make an impact where we are? So there are a lot of discussions on this. This is not something we take lightly.
No.
So we have quite a huge team on compliance, on responsible investment, basically.
So in terms of the hiring volume that you have and how you distribute internally roles and how much the hiring manager does themselves versus how much you as a talent acquisition function is supporting them, could you give us a bit more of under the hood looks of NBIM?
But if you talk about the large and global setup, I think to draw parallels to, for instance, Microsoft is just as interesting because they are even more global, right? So with regards to this setup, in NBIM, I can be specific, we are 2 recruiters and we cover the entire fund. When I was in Microsoft, they chose a different solution from having one local in one country doing recruitment for that one team. The advantage was, of course, that you get to know the entire office, you know the vibe and teams and everything, and you can really have a fruitful conversation with the candidates and so forth. But it's not scalable. So they move towards a more geographically a hub, if you like, like EMEA, North America, APAC, where a team of recruiters serve a large area, many countries, right? The disadvantage, obviously, is that you lose the closeness to the business, and you become more an administrative person than necessarily that really close to the candidates and the decisions. But what I think was better towards my time there was that we also split it down to business units. So there could be a geographical hub, but with business units. So you can have sales, marketing recruiters, you can have finance recruiters, you can have IT, right? And that's when the recruiters become sort of domain specialists, and it becomes more interesting to be a recruiter because you're closer to what's going on. And I think that's where we can contribute. We will never be, a deep technical or domain person in that sense, but much more than just, admin. So I think that's a good setup. For NBIM, we're only 620, right? So we don't need lots of different hubs. No. So even though I sit in Oslo, I serve all the locations. But I think what we've done, we split it in the investment roles, portfolio managers, traders, and almost the rest, right? Supporting functions. And you would be surprised to see how many supporting functions we hire, and less so on the trading side. And I think most people think, oh, the fund themselves have all these traders. Well, there are actually quite few percentage-wise, and it's also quite few who leaves. People stay. And if you work in NBIM in New York, in London, and Oslo with investment, I think you actually think it's quite a good place to be. So the turnover is low, so there's more activity on the supporting functions like I do. And that can be finance, compliance, IT, of course, etc. Yeah.
Well, in terms of hiring volume, what size were we talking about? You mentioned that you're 2 people. It seems like you're quite busy supporting that.
Yeah. So last year we hired 170 people.
Wow.
That was a lot. And I mean, it's the Ministry of Finance who decides the headcount in the fund. So that number is already given to Nikolai, and then it cascades down. So last year I think was unusually high. This year we will probably be more around 100, I think. And that's more doable.
Yeah, but how do you structure it? Still, that's the volume is high with 2 people covering all of those roles. Impressive. But does that mean that I assume that you need to get the hiring managers on board, and you need to empower them and train them, ensure that they are able to co-run some of these processes. So
yeah.
Could you let us know a bit more about how you work with hiring managers and how you're able to be as productive as you are?
Yep. No, so first of all, I work closely with all my hiring managers. I'm super fond of them. So I help them out with all, job ads, practicalities, timeline, who will be part of the process. We make a plan, right? When we start receiving applicants, the hiring manager will do the screening. So if the hiring manager is not able to do all the screening, we will just add whoever in the team who can take part in the screening. So there may be him or her or a team of 2-3 people who together collectively will screen, let's say, the 100 applicants, right? Then it's up to them to decide who do they bring in for a first screen interview. And that's sort of the first touch point with the candidates. So let's say out of the 100 applicants, we say a hiring manager and the team who helps out screening and me, we will say, 20 is too many, I may say. Can we boil it down to 12, 15? And then the hiring manager will have a screening call with all of them on Teams. We won't bring them into the office. So that's a 20 minutes quick call, hello, John, you applied. Talk me through why you applied, what are your background, etc. That's just a sanity call almost. And then from those, let's say 12, the hiring manager will say, I think we're left with 6. And then we'll bring those 6 people in for a more in-depth interview, meaning either a case, a modeling case, it could be a technical case, it could be, presentation, where the hiring manager will bring someone from his team, her team, and maybe also some stakeholders to evaluate. And that's, a longer sort of 2-hour thing. After that, they will say, these 6, I think 3 of them are interesting. And then I come on board and I will interview the 3. And I interview them based on, my focus will be obviously motivation, integrity, values, see how they experience the process. Do they have any doubts? All the practicalities around, changing a job. And from there, I will say to the hiring manager, I think we can take out 1. We have 2 left now. If we can decide which of those 2 we will go forward with, we only present 1 to the chief. But if not, we'll bring 2 candidates to the chief. The chief in the oil fund is the person below the CEO. Okay. And the chief will always have the final sort of, a grandpa almost interview. And that's more or less the process. And then we do reference checks and background checks and criminal records and all that.
Thank you so much for sharing and being open about the process. Seems like this way of sharing responsibility with the hiring managers and having them co-drive the process is a good way to do this at scale. A flip side and a challenge with this, of course, is ensuring consistency and ensuring that they know what the hiring bar is over at the NBIM. So how do you do that? How do you ensure, of course, you will come in and do gatekeeping on the values part of it, but in terms of the technical levels and ensuring that you continuously hire smarter and smarter people, what measures are you taking to ensure a high hiring bar?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that when we make the final decision, it's the team and the hiring manager. And sometimes the hiring manager will bring in a head or a global head from another team, just to make sure that are we on the level that you expect, because we deliver to you. So the mix between, so we don't get these silos, I think is important. I think it's important that the people who interview are properly prepped. Right? So it's not about who you are like or not like, but it's about the qualifications and the personality with respect to teamwork, right? But to make sure that the hiring manager has the same bar is always difficult, right? Because it's people we're talking to. To make sure that the hiring manager don't have personal preferences is almost impossible. But I do take part in quite a lot of the interviews to make sure that there's some consistency here. And I think if a hiring manager said, no, Kristin, I don't want anyone in my interviews, that would almost be like a red flag to me. I would think, I think maybe I should. And I think that most managers, to me, they're like, Kristin, please join me. It's so comfortable to be two people. Then we can have a retrospect afterwards. You can tell me, tips and tricks and all that. So I think to be transparent with each other is important. I also sit in on interviews where the chiefs have interviews, not to check, but to just have that sort of openness. And often the higher up in the organization you are, the more transparent they are. They have this learning attitude, which I really admire. So they don't hold things close to their chest. They're like, please join, right?
Yeah.
We have just made some new training material, and then we had decided to make it into videos, like short videos of 3-4 minutes, where the recruiter and myself, my colleague, we sort of speak to the hiring managers, and they can on the phone or whatever on the bus look through them, right? And there will be recruiting in NBIM, what to be aware of, do's and don'ts, probe, not prompt, diversity, things to be aware of. And there's short ones. So, and of course you can then see how many are watching them, how many are taking the courses, etc. So, and also we make like checklists for the managers. We make cheat sheets or one-pagers. We have a set of questions that we suggest you can pick and choose from depending on the role. So we have all on one landing page internally, easy to find. I think it's important it doesn't get lost in someone's mail. So the sum of it, I think, helps. But it's a constant thing, right?
Absolutely. There's never a guarantee, but it seems like you're taking a lot of measures to ensure that they have the information they need and that they have the sort of setup and proposed interview questions, etc. So definitely it seems like you're doing a lot on your end to ensure that consistency.
We're trying. It's like you don't want to offend anyone either. You don't want to come barging in and say, let me show you how to do it. You have to be a little bit street smart. But I believe in that openness and making it a bit humorous even, helps a long way.
Absolutely. Are you collecting any data from the processes on candidate feedback or quality of hire? Or?
Only real data we're collecting currently is feedback from the managers. So every time we run the process, like every month, we check all the managers and we send feedback or survey to them, so they can comment on the service and can comment on the level of the level of service basically. So, but regards to data, are you thinking about recruitment data as such? Yeah. When you do hiring for a while, you do get some rejections, and I think this is really important. How many says no to the offer, and then why? So do they say no because the process has been too long? It's been too many activities required? Has the hiring manager or the team not been, professional? Was the salary not good? Did they not offer a relocation package, etc.? And I think these data is important. That they really can make us think, we have 3 or 5 or 10 offers turned down in New York because they have to come to the office. Is that a problem? And if so, what can we do? So those data we collect, the traditional, how long does it take to fill a role? I don't find that so interesting. I didn't either when I was in Telenor and leading, I led a team. I don't think it's important whether you spend 40 days or 100 days, really. I think it's important to find the right candidates. And there are many reasons why sometimes the process takes longer. Cost of hire, that's maybe interesting. I don't find it to be very interesting because I think the impact that one person has when he joins will have such a huge impact compared to the tiny cost of recruiting that person. So I don't think it's important. Of course, it's important if we see that we use a lot on social media that never has an impact, or advertisement doesn't have an impact. But I think, not to focus on the negative things, but if people turn us down, I would really like to really dig into why.
Yeah. And I think that's spot on. You need actionable data, and offer acceptance rate and reason for rejection is definitely super interesting for a recruiter.
But with regards to, I haven't mentioned diversity. We don't measure diversity in the sense of how many male, female applicants. Well, we look at it, but it's not the main focus. Or how old are the applicants, or what nationalities. Certain countries we don't know the nationalities, in certain countries we don't know their age. But what I do think is interesting is to look at the people they actually hire, because the moment we have hired them, that's when we have the data. That's when we know their age and their nationalities and all that. And that's interesting because there are certain KPIs we have around diversity.
When you hire 170 people, obviously that's not going to be 100% success rate in terms of quality of hire. If you do, then I want to hire you, Kristin. You can take my job over here. But I think, how do you spot a bad hire? How do you loop that learning back to recruitment? How do you do a retrospective or analysis on what to improve in those cases?
Well, first of all, it's so painful when someone leaves within a year.
Yeah.
It's painful for, of course, the candidate him herself. It's painful for the team, for the hiring manager, for me, not the least. So I would say if someone leaves within a year, we would say it's a bad hire. And it goes just as much as on us as a company as on the candidate. There are many reasons here. So when I was in Microsoft, we discussed whether should we measure in Microsoft they're not anymore, but they had a scale from 1 to 5, or actually 5 to 1, with regards to performance, 1 being the best. And there was a discussion, we looked at whether the new hires got a 3, 2, or a 1, because that's a good hire, right? But then we decided not to, because there's so many other parameters or things that influences whether the candidate will stay and like it and thrive, right? Beyond just the mere performance. So we went away from that. I can think of 2 cases where we have terminated for different reasons the employment. And I always sit down with the manager and say, what went wrong? What should I have picked up? The person said this and that. I had a feeling of something, but I didn't say it. We did discuss it, but we thought, no, that will pass. We did get a few orange flag, not red, but we thought that was because of this and this and that. We made some excuses for it. How can we next time discover this earlier or in a better way, or just speak out freely? I don't have a process on how I approach it, but I'm really, really into talking with the hiring manager, because these managers I will work with again. So it's super important that we have an open dialogue and say, last time, I'm sorry it didn't turn out. But at the end of the day, I always say it's people we're dealing with, right? Sometimes it's almost impossible to know.
Yeah.
It's not a robot.
Yeah. that's the difficult thing about recruitment. You can't sort of get that. There's no method that has 100% predictive validity, right? It's all
No,
about risk reduction and ensuring that you increase probability of that hire being the right one.
But I can say that I'm in a role now where I can say I have my doubts. I don't think this is right. I sense something here. I know it's my belly talking and not my head. So there's an atmosphere or a culture in NBIM where you can say these things without they say, "Oh, come on, Kristin, don't be such a party pooper. Let's just get the person on board." Because people know how difficult it is to channel people out.
We've mentioned it before. You worked at Telenor, at DNB, Microsoft, now NBIM, larger organizations with a complex structure. What are the typical challenges that you see in those in the big companies when it comes to running efficient and high quality recruitment?
You have to make sure that you have really solid recruiters on board, right? But regardless of how solid it is, if the system is not, in place to really, and I mean the system, I talk about communication channels, how is the recruitment, what's the standing in the organization? Is the recruiters just a mere admin person, or are we really partners? The talent or application tracking systems need to be in place. All of these things. I think the big challenge, is to share candidates, for instance. I mean, it's almost impossible. Let's say you have applicants who apply for a similar role in France and in Germany. Different recruiters, different hiring managers. How do you share that person and that person is dealing with the same candidate? Because the candidate may not tell you that I have applied for several roles. That's one thing. Secondly, let's say that you bring in this perfect candidate on paper and you realize this is not a good hire. This is not a good candidate for personal attributes, social, whatever, not a good cultural fit. Things you can't really put down on paper, but that's the outcome of the process. How do you share that feedback? How do you not? How do you know that person wants to apply to another country and get, taken in? And with GDPR and with to be compliant to that, it's almost impossible. So I think that's a huge challenge. We can't tag candidates, right? To make sure that the candidates themselves feel that there's the same sort of experience when they apply to a large organization. They expect the same process. If they applied for one country one time and the son applies somewhere else and it's a completely different process, that's not good. That could be a bad candidate experience. But I think that the sharing knowledge of a candidate is probably the biggest challenge in large organizations. And we always talk about, well, this candidate is not good for this role today, right now, but she can be excellent for something else. It's really hard to keep track of that.
Yeah. Have you found that a good system of doing talent pooling and nurturing a candidate base for potential future candidates? I find that to be super difficult because recruiters are so busy with the here and now that having a strategic approach to that sort of nurturing game and for tomorrow's hires, that's a tricky one.
I mean, I can always tell you that when I speak to really great candidate, I put it into my calendar that in 6 months' time I call Mr. John because but that's not scalable. And that's just for me, right? That's not sharing with other people. I mean, in 3 months' time, that candidate may not be there anymore, right? So already a database is a bit of a nonsense thing. I know when the recruitment agency says that we have a giant database of 10,000 applicants, it doesn't impress me. You can have an Excel sheet, right? Constantly keep track of it. I've tried. I don't have a good solution for it. And now with our system now, they will take the candidates out or anonymize them after 12 months. So I lose them already there. So I haven't solved it at all.
Oh, it's definitely a tricky one, and GDPR is not making it easier, which is it has many benefits, but from a nurturing point of view and a long-term commitment point of view with the candidate database, it's a bit of an obstacle.
But I often say to candidates, I mean, I really enjoy talking to you, Tor. I'd love for you to get back to me in 6 months' time. Give me a call. So I sort of put it back on them.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Makes sense.
they know whether they're available or interested.
Yeah.
I know it's a bit of a passive way to do it, but at least that's one way, right?
Yeah. Agree. What in your role today? What are those main challenges that you have? What are the bottlenecks that you're trying to solve, or when you're looking at 2024? These are the 3 problems that we have at NBIM now, and this is how we're going to solve it.
Well, awareness, I would say. For instance, in Tokyo, 7 people in the office, so 37 million people. We're doing real estate. They have to speak fluent English and know the real estate market and know modeling. It's almost impossible, right? That's a very specific case. With Nikolai's podcast, actually, we have become more aware amongst investment banking environment, at least, both in New York, London, and obviously in Oslo. But the biggest challenge, I think, is the awareness out there, right? Even though the oil fund owns 1.5% of all the shares in the world, we're not very known out there. So that's one thing. Another thing is how to make sure that we don't stumble at the very end when you hire people, because we need people all the time. How do we know? We have extremely smart people in the fund, doctorates and, PhDs and all that. Are they always the right people? Is there a shift in the market that, you don't need double masters and a PhD to do this job? Should we maybe look more on personality traits and, that side, which is one of my big things. I always talk to hiring managers about the personality here, to put more emphasis and take time to actually check out the personal side.
Any other areas where you find it a bit difficult to recruit?
Well, I think this is not my main domain, but I think renewable energy. People with that kind of knowledge, I guess it's a fairly new industry. People will argue with me, but it's fairly new industry. So to have people who are senior in that in Norway is difficult. I think it's hard to find super duper technical cybersecurity people in Singapore. But I mean, we talked about that for many years, and it's just an ongoing thing. So it's nothing new there.
No. You mentioned that one of the most important things with building a recruitment team and the setup with a complex organization is the recruiters. So for you, what makes a good recruiter?
Well, first of all, I think you have to be approachable. You have to be a really curious person in general. You have to be curious. You can't pretend being curious. That never works. And I think you should have, the sense of when to be quiet, when to listen. And you have to have that self, what's the word? You have to trust yourself on when to put your foot down with a hiring manager and say, I think we should stop and reflect and think. If you always go along and you only take instructions and you never, reflect and say stop, I think that's not a good sign. So, and you have to handle a billion things at the same time. And you have to follow things through. And you have to be detail oriented, right? And you have to be personable. I think it's really important to think that even though you represent something as conservative as the banking industry or, Microsoft, whatever, you're allowed to be personable. You're allowed to be, nice. And I think when you work with candidates, you should put the threshold very low so they can ask questions. To put yourself high up here and, you're a very important person, that's a bad trait, I think. So try to put yourself in the back. It's a good sign, I think.
And I think it also reflects that the recruiter role, you need a lot of different traits.
Definitely.
It's the operational part, it's the relational part, it's the analytical part.
Yes.
So there's a lot of skills needed to be able to be a successful recruiter. And speaking of recruiters, sometimes you're not you're not handling the roles internally. You're using agencies, and I know you've used it in previous companies as well. So,
Yep.
what are your reflections on working with agencies and the play that our corporates have working with agencies, and that balance, when to use it, when not to use it, how to succeed in the collaboration?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say that large corporations should have an in-house recruitment team.
Mm,
Period.
mm, mm,
When and if we need to use an agency, we will, right?
mm,
But then to have agencies that you really trust to be representative for your company is important. But
mm,
I think that if I have an agency who does a process together with a hiring manager, I won't
mm,
just let go. I won't just say, okay, you, Tor, and my hiring manager, you just do the job because I
mm,
have so many other things I want to do. So
mm,
I'm done now. I think that's a big mistake. I think you really should stay close. It should be a sort of a threesome where you collaborate
mm,
to follow up, make sure things are constantly, correct.
mm,
Make sure the hiring manager gets back to the agency when needed. Make sure the agency is, projecting the right story here.
mm,
Ensure that the candidates are taken care of. I think
mm,
it's a big mistake if you let the agency just go along.
mm,
But to create that long-term relation with an agency, I think is
mm,
key
mm,
because they will eventually get NBIM under the skin and think, I know what changes happened 3 years ago. I know the new team. I know the history here. I can
mm,
talk in a much more relaxed and natural way with candidates.
mm, mm,
So to have a long-term relationship, have an open one, and make sure the hiring manager and the agency doesn't do it on their own, I think is
mm.
important.
Yeah.
And I mean, um, I tend to not use agencies unless I have to.
Mm,
I do feel I have more control of the process when I run it myself or with a
mm,
hiring manager, but at the same time, I'm not able to do them all, right?
mm,
Or, for instance, we have roles that is not a natural thing for candidates to find on our websites.
mm,
For instance, now we have a social media expert
mm,
role in communications. So people looking at NBIM websites, they usually don't have a social media video background. So in
mm,
that sense, it's natural for us to use an agency.
mm.
So yeah,
Makes sense. Makes sense. No,
yeah.
that's really good. Just wrapping up with a question around technology and AI. There's a lot of stuff happening at the moment now with ChatGPT. Um, I assume in your role you have potentially, I don't know if you had the time, but the opportunity to explore a bit. But at the same time, there are, of course, limitations being part of a public setup, and also the size of the organization introducing, I don't know, radical new technologies, a bit more, not necessarily painful, but you need to make sure that it's safe and it's good use of time and money. So what's your reflections around technology within recruitment, and also how are you using it in the day to day?
Well, remember, Tor, I'm an old lady, so quite conservative here. I remember back in my DNB days, we checked out, I can't remember the name of the company, but they had a service or software where candidates were interviewed by a bot almost, right? And the system would read the facial expressions and the tone of voice, etc. They used it for instance, hiring volume, right? Big warehouses, for instance, 100 people in. And we evaluated that kind of technology for DNB. I was against it, and again, because I'm not only old, but I feel that I don't want to leave that up to a machine to do. It's not because I'm afraid to lose my job at all. It's more because I really think that personal connection is important. And often the company would say, well, then you are lower. There's lower need for time and effort from you guys at the early stage when you have 1,000 applicants. I understand that, but I still think that first meeting with a company should not be a bot. Secondly, whether a machine can read resumes, for instance, wouldn't that be lovely? In a way, yes, but I don't think it's GDPR friendly. I sense that there's something there that I wouldn't trust. I think it's better to when you post a role that you have some kick out questions, so you no longer you're not relevant for the role kind of questions that you can screen on that, rather than having a bot talking to you.
Yeah.
But on the other flip side, I can see that applicants use AI quite good in writing applications. So you can almost be fooled with how great application letters are today. So I'm almost like saying, stop it. I don't want application letters anymore. I only want your resume.
We see that being a massive trend at the moment, that companies are now moving away from application letters because they're losing their value when ChatGPT has entered the world and the recruitment space.
I actually think the tracking system should be connected to, for instance, LinkedIn. So instead of making a CV, they can just refer to the LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is almost you can't make up anything and put it on LinkedIn, right?
It's more of like a society where skills and experience is validated.
Yes.
You need to,
exactly. But we're not there yet. No,
not there yet. If we have time, I want to just ask one last question. We talked about Nikolai and his podcast. So if there's an open mic here for you to request something for the recruitment team over at NBIM, what would that be for 2024? What do you want from him or for the company for you to succeed?
Well, I think I got much more than I hoped for when I started. I mean, he's out there on every university. He speaks with all the students everywhere. He will take any call to any candidate. If I'm in a final stage with a candidate, I'll say to Nikolai, please, can you persuade him? And he will call him personally. So I think I'm extremely lucky. I don't actually think I can ask for that much more. I worked in, like I said, I'm not going to name names, but I can say I never heard the CEO talk about talents. I never heard him talk about the importance of the people and the strategies. I never saw them, really, genuinely interested in bringing smart people on board. And still, that's the most important thing. I never understood that. That's probably one of the reasons I joined them, because Nikolai is definitely, he sees that, he understands the importance of people.
Good closing comments. Yes. And a potential comment for a raise here, Kristin.
Yes.
Yeah. But thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's been a really pleasure and very insightful to get your perspectives and learnings shared with me and also people listening to this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been fun. Take care.
Perfect. Take care. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to like and subscribe. We'll be launching a new episode every single month. See you next time.